If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Welcome to my channel where we cover the lore of Final Fantasy XIV. We cover the stories both big and small, the epic and the cute, the silly and the tragic. I hope you all enjoy the ride, and welcome to the Chronicler of Lore. While the Warrior of Light is making her way through Limsa Lominsa, a member of the Yellow Jackets who just so happens to be looking for an adventurer calls out to her. There have been some reports of a con man who's been claiming to be a blue mage going around and selling soul crystals to adventurers for a nice chunk of money. They're supposed to give the wielder a lot of powers, but apparently it's a load of BS according to a lot of very unsatisfied customers. Magic's not really this particular Yellow Jacket's area of expertise, so she wants you to come with her and see if these crystals are actually legit. If not, she's gonna arrest the man and give you some money for your help. If they are real, then maybe the new skills that you can learn from it will be worth the trouble. Either way is a win for the Warrior of Light, so she agrees to tag along to Summerford Farms, where the man has been doing most of his selling. The two of you show up just in time to see the man give his little spiel to a group of adventurers. His name is Martin, and he claims that blue magic comes from the New World. Out in the New World, a tribe of people called the Wallachie have their own unique form of magic. It still draws ether from the land around them like black and white magic, but instead of using that ether to manipulate the elements like normal mages, they use nature in the same way that wild animals do, meaning they can use the techniques of monsters. The magic is extremely powerful, but learning it can get you killed, since blue mages have to fight said monsters and let them use the techniques so they can learn the skills. Meaning to master the art of blue magic, you have to take a serious beating. Martin got pretty good at it, and now he's ready to bring that art to Eorzea. All it takes to get started is a soul crystal, as well as a spell book that he's personally written. He's even got the outfits that'll make his pupils look the part. Even though he put on a good show, an axe-wielding woman's not convinced. She thinks he's trying to scam people, and since no one's likely to survive fighting monsters while wearing the silly blue mage costumes, no one will even live long enough to prove that Martin's a con man. Her words seem to be swaying the people, but a pair of Mage come charging in to attack. That gives Martin the perfect opportunity to show off his techniques to drive the beasts away, and that drives the adventurers right into his hands. Seeing him in action against real opponents, they all sign up to be blue mages. The Yellow Jacket thinks the timing of the attack was a little suspicious, so she decides to follow him to see what he does next. The two of you follow the man to the Morabi docks, where one of the guards say that he's seen Martin wandering around in the area a lot over the last few days, and he's been begging for food, which is a little weird since his blue mage scam does seem to be making a decent amount of money. That's just one more thing that he needs to be questioned about when you find him, so the two of you head to the Salt Strand where he was last seen. Turns out Martin and the two Mage who had attacked were working together, which is enough for the Yellow Jacket to charge all three of them with fraud. But Martin insists that he's not lying about the soul crystals or blue magic, even though his sales technique is a little shady. The only reason people haven't been able to make them work is, like so many people in the real world, they didn't do a little thing called reading the instructions. And while he did cut a few corners on the outfits, they are made to help maximize the potential of a blue mage. The Yellow Jacket still needs proof that the crystals work, so she asks the Warrior of Light to test them out, something she's not exactly eager to do, but Martin offers to let her borrow one of the outfits for free, so she reluctantly agrees. He has his Mage attempting to lure out a small kraken so you can fight it and learn the water cannon spell, just to prove that the soul crystal actually works, but the kraken that shows up is anything but small. Considering the fact that it has to shoot you with its water cannons for you to learn the technique, that makes things a little bad. Fortunately, you don't die, and you actually manage to learn the spell. The one little detail that Martin left out when he was convincing people to learn the job is that while you can become extremely powerful eventually, you start off horribly weak, which makes learning spells extremely risky and potentially fatal. While this art will likely lead to a lot of people's deaths, he's not lying, and as more proof, he'll let you keep the gear so you can be a living example of the fact that blue mages are legit. After you hit one of the Mamoja in the face with a water cannon to prove that you actually did learn the spell, the Yellow Jacket admits that Martin's not a fraud. But since he does seem to be trying to get people killed by not explaining stuff properly, she bans him from selling anything Blue Mage related or she will arrest him. The loss of his revenue stream puts a dampener on his spirits, but a woman who had been following you all seems to think this Blue Mage thing could draw a crowd. Her name is Royce, and she runs a place called the Celestium in Ul'dah. It's an arena similar to the Colosseum, but instead of fighting people, the fighters are put against monsters. The fights are stopped before people die, usually, since her crowd tends to enjoy the fight more than watching people get murdered. The fighters wear costumes and put on a show like the WWF, but instead of shirtless men and voluptuous women duking it out in flashy ways, people are set to fight things like behemoths. Royce does well with the place, but she wants to make it known worldwide, and she thinks having blue magic being used there would do the trick. She wants Martin to be the headliner of a brand new event called the Masked Carnival, where he faces down beasts with his magic. Martin takes his blue magic seriously, and he didn't train as hard as he did just to work as a circus act, but when she tells him how much money he can make, his morals go right out the window. The thing is, Royce doesn't just want Martin, she wants you too. As new as the Warrior of Light is to blue magic, she'd end up being eaten by an overly aggressive ladybug, a fact that Martin points out, but Royce thinks you'll be fine if Martin trains you. He's not exactly interested in doing that until Royce offers to pay him for that too. Money's clearly the most important thing to the man, so he agrees, and you all head back to Ul'dah so he can get his costume. Royce has Martin dress up like a blue pimp complete with a cane, and since his name is pretty boring, she renames him the Great Azuro, which comes complete with a backstory, a pretty simple one. He's a nobleman who decided to show off his blue magic for the Celestium. The story needs a little work, and before things are all over, she'll probably have one for you too. Ul'dah has a strict law that keeps all beast tribes out, but there was no mention of the Mamoja, so they can stay in the city. Since all of that's taken care of, Royce leaves you to your training. Most of your learning will come from the creatures you fight, but to give your training a bit of direction, Martin's going to have you hunt for specific spells in between whatever other training he has for you to do. By the time the Warrior of Light comes back from learning how to drink blood like a bat, Martin's already had a few matches in the Celestium, and he has a lot of fans. Once he gets rid of them, he actually has a bit of training for you that he'll explain once you're out in the Spineless Basin. It's nothing major. There are some hornets that the locals say are pretty dangerous, and he wants you to deal with them. After you take care of the giant murder hornet, you meet back up with Martin just in time to see that this little exercise wasn't random at all. Someone had paid him to deal with the thing, and he'd pawned the work off to you disguised as training. Technically, you needed to practice your spells, so Martin doesn't see anything wrong with him making a bit of money off of you. But since you caught him in the act, he'll split the money with you. After handing over your cut, which is a little smaller than you expected, and sending you off to learn another spell, he takes you back to the basin to kill a few moles for some money. At least he told you about it up front this time. After making short work of the critters, you head back to Martin, who's been found by some men who he made the mistake of borrowing money from. He paid them back, but he forgot about this little thing called interest. Since he doesn't have the cash on him, they take his clothes, which Royce won't be happy about before leaving. Walking back to the city in his underwear doesn't seem to faze the man one bit, but Royce telling him that he has to pay for the outfit that he lost does. And his day gets even worse when a large Roganin named Washtrock that Martin seems to know very well shows up. He'd heard about the Blue Mage at the Masked Carnival, and he knew that it had to be Martin. He claims they were friends, but Martin isn't exactly being nice, so the man leaves. The two of them had been in the Arcanist Guild together, where they had studied magic from outside of Eorzea. They had gone to the New World together and learned blue magic from the Wallachie, but when they got back, the guild said that learning the blue magic wasn't practical and cut their funding. Martin didn't think it was a waste of time or money, so he paid for another trip to the Wallachie on his own, which is how he ended up in so much debt. Washtrock had decided to abandon the research since there was no money in it, despite the fact that he's possibly even better at blue magic than Martin. He quit the practice, came back to Eorzea, and started a trading company with his friends. Now he's filthy rich and Martin's a little salty about it, but that's not the Warrior of Light's problem. She's there for training, so Martin sends her off to learn another spell. You complete the task faster than Martin had expected, so he tells you to come back for your training later while he goes to handle some business of his own. While he's away, Royce comes by, and after checking on your progress, she lets you know why she really showed up. While Martin had promised her that he'd paid off the debt collectors who had stolen his costume, it turns out he's been borrowing money from a different group of hoodlums. Royce can't have him damaging the reputation of her organization, so she needs to find out what Martin's gotten himself involved in. The Mamuja don't have a clue what the man's up to either, and since what he's doing affects the Warrior of Light too, she's down with following him. The two of you see him heading into the Alchemist Guild without his usual blue costume. He clearly doesn't want to be recognized, but that doesn't reveal what he's up to, so the two of you follow him out of the city where he meets up with some shady people to buy some dream flowers. Hearing that's what he's buying causes Royce to talk a little louder than she should have, which causes the two dealers to turn on Martin. You jump in and deal with them, leaving Martin safe enough for Royce to snap at for buying the plants, which are the key ingredients for Somnus. Whether he was planning on selling it or using it doesn't matter, because Royce refuses to do business with anyone who uses Somnus for anything. That's not what Martin's been doing. He's been buying the flowers to make a medicine for the Wallachie. The people there are sick with the plague, likely brought to their lands by the foreigners from Eorzea, and it's a pretty bad one. For Eorzeans, the disease is barely worse than a cold, but it's fatal to the Wallachie, and it's spreading fast. One of their doctors is doing all that he can with their particular medicines, but it's not working, and without a cure, their entire race could end up extinct. Knowing that he was a part of the problem is the reason why Martin is working so hard to help fix it, so he had come back to Eorzea to find a cure. The research put him in even more debt, but he managed to find it. The problem is it takes dream flowers to make it, and since it needs to be mass produced, he needs a lot of them. That's why he's been dealing with so many shady people and the Alchemist Guild. Royce wishes he had told her all of this from the beginning so she could have helped, but now that she knows what's going on, she'll let Martin keep performing at the Celestium, and she'll use her contacts to get the flowers for him. Martin's super grateful to the woman, but she'll call it even if he puts on a few extra shows. The crowd really likes him, and what they like, they pay for. He's all for making extra money, obviously, but she doesn't really enjoy discussing business out in the woods, so you all head back to the city. Royce's merchant friend gets his dream flowers processed before they come to Ul'dah, which lets them bypass the whole ban thing. Granted, they're still super expensive, which means Martin will have to put on even more shows to pay for them. That also means he'll have less time to train you, so he sends you off to learn another spell while he gets to work. When you make it back, the Mamuja hit you with some bad news. While you were gone, Martin got hurt pretty badly in a match. Now he's in the hospital, and that means he can't train you at all. Surprisingly enough, Washstruck shows up and offers to take over your training while Martin's incapacitated, and since he was a better student of blue magic than Martin, he's more than qualified. Even the Mamuja admit that the man is as good as he says he is, so you head out to Horizon with him to get a lesson. The man rode out there in some Garlean Magitech. Since his company does some work at a cerulean processing plant, he indirectly does a bit of work with the Empire. He'd found his not-so-little Magitech toy abandoned on the outside of Castra Meridianum, and he refurbished it so he could learn more about it. He's learned all that he can from it, so he lets you fight it as a part of your training. Even though you overpower the thing, Washstruck still thinks the age of fighting with swords and magic is coming to an end. Battles will be won and lost in the future with technology. Eorzea is still staying primitive while the Garleans are advancing fast, and if they don't get with the times, things won't end well for them. Washstruck thinks that it won't be long before the Grand Company start fighting with Magitech of their own, and all of that tech needs ceruleum to power it, which is part of the reason for all of the fighting in Northern Thanalan. Washstruck said all of that for the purpose of trying to get you to come and work with him, but he doesn't need your answer now. Regardless of how he feels about technology and magic, he is shocked that you got so good at blue magic with Martin as your teacher, but he knows that he can make you better than Martin ever could. Martin has no intentions of letting the man steal his student, and he shows up even though he's supposed to be in bed. Since he's finally face to face with him again, Washstruck did have a bone to pick with Martin. He'd heard about how far the man was going to help the Wallachie, which is admirable, but what he doesn't understand is why the man never came to him. They had gone their separate ways, but they didn't have any bad blood between them, and Washstruck is just as grateful to the Wallachie as Martin is. Now that Martin's hurt, he doesn't really have a choice but to accept the man's help, and he has a lot of resources, so the cure will be ready in no time. And once it's done, since Martin can't go, he'll even deliver it to the Wallachie. Martin had never thought the man would do anything that didn't turn a profit, but he could have been wrong about him. Whether Washstruck is selfish or not, You still have some training to do, so he sends you off to learn another spell while he gets some rest. During the time it takes for you to learn Glower, Martin gets a letter saying that Washdrach actually did what he said, and the Wallachie have been saved. But the celebration is short-lived because a young man named Seatta comes running up to Martin, and he's pretty frantic. The boy's the doctor from the New World who had been trying to stop the plague, and he says that while Washdrach did bring the cure, he used it to take control of a place called the Lapis Canyon. It's a sacred place to the Wallachie that always glows blue because of a large deposit of ceruleum that's underneath it. That's the whole reason the man offered to help in the first place. Martin's a little ticked off, so he heads off with Seatta to confront him, but since he's injured, you go with him. Washdrach admits that his main goal was to get his hands on the ceruleum, but he didn't exactly steal it. He had the Wallachie sign a perfectly legal Eorzean contract, but since the elders can't read Eorzean, and Washdrach said that they couldn't have the medicine if they didn't sign, he's 100% a thief. Seatta points out that Eorzean laws don't apply to the Wallachie, but Washdrach knows that the elders will honor it, since he had already spent a lot of money on the cure even before the negotiations had started. He tries to guilt trip the boy, but the fact remains that he took advantage of their suffering to steal something that's been at the center of their beliefs for generations. Washdrach doesn't have any respect for their superstitions, and leaving the ceruleum underground because they think it's the lifeblood of the planet is a waste of resources that could be used to push the Wallachie people into the modern era. He doesn't understand or care about the fact that not everyone wants to have that life. While it may seem primitive to him, it works for their people, and since they aren't hurting anyone else by practicing their beliefs, he's totally wrong for trying to force them into things that he thinks is better. Something that Martin points out. Either way, he has an investor who funded his expedition, and they'll want their money too. That investor turns out to be Royce, which makes me wonder just how rich that woman actually is. Granted, she had invested because she was interested in trading with the Wallachie, but she hadn't heard anything about a ceruleum mine, and she's not all that happy about the fact that Washdrach did some shady business to trick the Wallachie people out of their property. She still thinks it'll be a good way to make some money, but not if it comes at the expense of the Wallachie. That puts her in a bit of a tight spot, so she figures that the best way to solve this problem is for Martin and Washdrach to fight it out in the Celestium. Blue Mage versus Blue Mage. Washdrach is fine with that, but he says quite confidently that even if Martin wasn't injured, the man would never be able to beat him. Whether that's true or not, Martin is too hurt to fight, so Royce believes that it's time for his apprentice to make her debut as Azeroth II. If you win, she'll cut off the funding for the Lapis Canyon. If Washdrach wins, she wants Martin to help convince the Wallachie to go along with it. Martin doesn't really want to be a part of this, but Seatta says that even in their culture, when two sides have a disagreement, they each pick a fighter and they duke it out. Normally one of the Wallachie would fight on their behalf, but since he's in Eorzea, Seatta asks you to do it. Since there's no one else, the Warrior of Light agrees, so that means it's time for the most important part of this, getting your costumes ready and seeing just what Washdrach is capable of. Royce of course has the Warrior of Light dress up as Azeroth, since she is playing the role of his apprentice, and after doing a demonstration of her techniques that missed the target but hit one of the Mamoja, Royce thinks she's ready. But after getting a look at Washdrach's costume that has him looking like a floating demon who Royce says is a warlock called Azumagia, with powers that transcend the dimensions, the Warrior of Light may not be as ready as she thinks, especially since the man shows off some primal level blue magic. Washdrach doesn't understand why he has to play the villain, but since that's his part, he'll do it well. And he definitely looks evil with the whole mask and floating thing, an effect that came pretty cheap with the ceruleum levitation device. He's so confident that he'll win that he's fine with giving you as much time as you need to train. Martin doesn't think you need any more training. He's pretty sure that the Warrior of Light is ready to face the man, so she steps into the ring to face off against Azumagia in a battle that'll determine the fate of the Wallachie people. Washdrach wasn't kidding about being a powerful blue mage, but the Warrior of Light's training and him spending more time focused on making money than honing his magic abilities allows you to beat him. Everyone is happy that you won, especially since Royce honors her promise and cuts the funding for the ceruleum mine. Even though he wanted to win, Washdrach isn't a sore loser, and he happily puts an end to his plans for the Lapis Canyon. Plus, the New World is a pretty big place, and he's sure that he can find another ceruleum deposit. He's going to be heading back out there in a few days on an expedition funded again by Royce, and Seatta agrees to go with him as a guide to keep him away from Wallachie lands and to show him where a few unclaimed places like Lapis Canyon might be. As for Martin, he's starting to think that since the two of you got a lot of attention as blue mages, the time is finally right for him to open a guild. But for that he'll need money, and thankfully there's plenty of that to be made in the Celestium. This concludes the first part of the Blue Mage storyline. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and if you really want to show your support, you can donate to the channel through the link in the description. Until next time guys, later.